Hello, and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog. Today, we have another of our ongoing series of designer and maker interviews where we talk with people from the RPG community, uh, the makers and creators, whether it's podcasts, art, product. Today we have Carl. Now I'm gonna see I got it right before. I'm gonna mispronounce it now, Carl. Carl Hale.
Heil.
Heil, you see? I just so you folks, the inside joke is we had a little technical problems. We had to reboot this because we're at the beginning. And I got the name right the first time, so of course I overthought it and got his last name wrong the second time. There you go. Well, at least it makes it for an interesting inside joke for the two of us. Maybe not the rest of you.
Sure.
So Carl, tell us a little bit about what you do within the RPG community.
Well, I'm on a couple of podcasts. I am one of the current hosts of the Save or Die podcast.
Nice.
And I am a host for the Crusader, a podcast about the Castles and Crusades role-playing game.
Oh, well, yes, I've heard about that. I actually listened into the second episode. Who's your at least one of your co-hosts? What's his name from Troll Lords? Was at all the conventions?
Tyler Morrison.
Tyler, yes. I was gonna say the guy with the really long beard, which wouldn't help anybody visually.
Sure.
On my end, but yes, Tyler usually lets me know when a new episode is up. Oh, that's cool. So now that we are here, and hopefully the mic's last, I'm going to hit you with 5 questions. The same questions I ask everybody that comes onto the other side of this virtual table, and it allows us to start with a common ground on all these interviews. So my first question to you, Carl, is tell us about your first RPG experience.
Well, my dad was a RPG player before me,
Really?
and he introduced me to the game. Yeah, I'm young for the OSR, but I'm old for a second generation gamer. But my dad was playing Dungeons and Dragons with some friends of his, and he just thought we would like it, my brother and I, and he introduced us to the game. I remember creating a human fighter in second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This would have been around 92. So, like I said, pretty young for the OSR. But I created that character, and I remember running through a quick encounter with some bandits with my dad's friends. And then when we got home, my dad ran my brother and I through a short dungeon where we crawled down a tunnel and fought a giant slug. And I mean, it was viscerally put into my memory forever, burnt in there. It made such an impact.
Well, that seems to be what it is for a lot of the people I've spoken with, is that first RPG experience, because it sparks something in your imagination. It's burned into you. I mean, I mentioned, I believe, with Tom Canals, I can still smell the smell of my friend's bedroom when I think about that first time that we played. And certain things you just keep with you from that. So that's pretty damn cool.
I think there's a differentiation based on the age you were when you started. Whereas if you're much younger, I was 10 when I started. You remember the visceral experience of the game, and if you were a little bit older when you started, it dawned on you the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I was 12, 13 when I was first introduced to it, and it was magical.
Yeah,
it really, damn, it ripped the shoes off my feet type of deal. It was great. All right. Well, now, actually, now you mentioned that you do a podcast for Castles and Crusades. Save or Die focuses on which OSR?
Classic. So any Dungeons and Dragons that doesn't have an A behind it or a number in front of it.
Okay. So then here, I'm going to ask you the following question. What is your go-to RPG system and why?
Well, I love Moldvay, Cook, Marsh, Basic, Expert, Dungeons and Dragons. I love just the amount of streamlined possibility within it. I like that it focuses on these kind of core archetypes of this game that we've kind of expanded and expanded and expanded as a group of players into this kind of core set that you would expect from early on in the game. And I also love Castles and Crusades because to me it is kind of built upon innovation layered over innovation. And I mean, I like to say Castles and Crusades is the game so popular they turned it into 5th edition.
Okay, well, I look at it as a sort of Rosetta Stone to me because
Oh, absolutely.
you can take anything that was written for 3X and pretty much run it with Castles and Crusades with minimal effort. Yet Castles and Crusades plays very much like an OSR game, even though it kind of hews in a lot of ways closer to 3rd edition. It doesn't play that way.
It is a little bit different from what people. I wouldn't call it a retro clone, and I think that term has kind of loosened over the years of use. But what it does differently from a lot of retro clones is it's not emulating any version of Dungeons and Dragons proper. It is looking at the entirety of the history of the game and creating its own batch of cookies and making something that really functions well and totally gets out of the way. Like I said, I love basic expert Dungeons and Dragons, but there are times where it kind of gets in your way and you've got to just play the game. Where in Castles and Crusades, there's never a time where you can't just roll with the narrative and roll a d20 and figure out what happens.
Well, and I think you struck the nail on the head when you said it emulates. It's not so much a retro clone trying to replicate; it is trying to emulate. It's trying to give you the experience, but not necessarily bring you there the same way Basic Expert would have.
Mm-hmm.
I think it succeeds very well at doing that. Okay. Now, since you're a Basic Expert companion, the whole Masters deal,
mostly Basic Expert. I very rarely get that high level.
I personally, to me, it starts usually getting a little. What's the word I'm looking for? Not flaky. Well, I guess around 9th level when you get 5th level spells. The game really starts to become a whole different game in my mind. But
yeah, there are definitely tiers.
Yeah, and that kind of hits that. But since you are a Basic Expert person, race as class, yay or nay?
Absolutely, 100% yay. I'll probably be one of the minority that is vehemently for race as class. I know some people are really, really, really against it, and some people are okay with it, but I think it is fantastic.
Okay, so I'm kind of on both sides of the fence because I don't like the idea that all dwarves are basically fighters. However, Adventure Conqueror King system, which is basically BX house ruled, gives you classes that are racial classes. So, like, if you're a dwarf, you'll have some racial classes that nobody else can be, and they might replicate some stuff that you would be looking at on your regular BX classes for a human. So I think I could settle for that. I could settle for X.
Well, here's my reasoning on why I like race as class is because at its core, at its most basic level, Dungeons and Dragons is a game of archetypes. We have these fantasy archetypes that we've seen in fantasy fiction pre D&D. And D&D, to its credit, changed the landscape of fantasy fiction. It changed the outcome of what a fantasy world looks like based on the tinkering that people did within their own games. But prior to D&D, there is no such thing as a dwarven wizard or cleric or a halfling barbarian or anything so when you think about it in terms of archetypes, the archetype is halfling or wizard or fighter or elf. The archetype isn't elven wizard or elven fighter. There's not a fantasy example of that pre D&D.
I never looked at it that way. You're probably right. That's an interesting point of view.
Now, someone will say Legolas. Someone will. You listening at home, I hear you saying, what about Legolas? The dude calmed animals. He walked on snow. He saw for miles. He's a magical entity, even if he's not throwing fireballs.
Okay. So then what about Bilbo? He's a burglar, but D&D has all halflings as fighters.
Well, only thing that Bilbo is ever able to do is sneak, which the BX halfling is exceptional at. He's not very successful at any other thiefy things. He's not disarming traps or successfully picking pockets. He does manage to get one off a troll, but it certainly doesn't work out for him. He's never picking any locks. I mean, he's not. He wears armor. He uses a sword. He is I would say a pretty archetypical halfling from BX, and I think all of the halflings are pretty similar within the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien narrative at all.
Well, yeah, I guess Bilbo and Frodo are the exceptions because they actually wanted to go on adventures, enjoy the adventures, as opposed to most hobbits who preferred to stay home.
There's like the Tookish side of them. There's the separation between halflings. There's Tooks that go on adventures and the rest that don't. But I mean, it's one of those things that the structure of them, there's not really a major difference between Sam, Frodo, Bilbo, Merry, Pippin, ability wise. They all are functionally the same if you would put them into the terms of a Dungeons and Dragons class.
Yeah. I guess Sam would be more of a fighter, but that's only because he's a protector type.
He just got a higher strength, man.
Yeah. It's all on those dice rolls, damn it. It's all on those dice rolls. All right. Well, here. Now, where do you stand on? And I'm not talking about your podcast, but where do you stand on Save or Die?
I think Save or Die. You know, and I had a joke planned for you to. I was like, let me put a joke in my pocket for when he asked me about Save or Die. But that's all right. No, I think it is something you have to utilize in a way that isn't like a gotcha DM's favorite tool. You know, you've got to avoid that urge to be that person who's like, oh, you opened the door? Well, guess what? There's a basilisk behind it.
Save or die.
But I think it's important for the cards to be on the table when Save or Die is part of the possible outcome. I like Save or Die. I like the mechanic. I like that it's kind of an all or nothing. This is a single die roll that, determines success or absolute failure.
Right.
But I do think it can be used really poorly. And I think a lot of the reason why there's a lot of pushback against it is because people had poor experiences with it being used poorly. And it's one of those things that it depends on the type of game you're running. I think there's nothing wrong with running low mortality games and nothing wrong with running high mortality games. And obviously in the later, Save or Die is fine.
Right. And I think that Save or Die works better in a campaign that's being run with the idea that there are non-player character clerics that can raise dead or resurrect, or druids that can reincarnate, than a lower magic game where dead is generally dead. I think there's a balance between those.
Yeah. Then the danger becomes dying and not being able to be recovered.
Right.
Falling in the lava pit.
Yeah, that is the oh shit, now we gotta get a wish spell. Not fun. All right. Now here we're going to move on to the last of your 5 questions. What would the teenage you think if they could see what you would accomplish in a hobby by this point in your life?
Well, I'm a little less accomplished than a lot of your guests.
Not, dude, you're on 2 podcasts.
um, I think the teenage me would be astounded at the community around role-playing games as it is today, period. Just the idea that, I mean, it's become, for lack of a better word, mainstream and cool and hip to be playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, damn, yeah. And I think that the internet has done a great deal to enable that community to be built.
Yeah, and I think it's nothing but positive. I have zero apprehension about. I mean, it blows my mind. It's not something I'm used to, but I think it's good. I think it's a positive thing.
No, I
But honestly, I mean, 2 years ago, or however long it was, when I was listening to Save or Die, I wanted to be on the show. So
there you go, man.
So now that I'm on it, I mean, I feel like that's cool. That's a success.
All right, so now, all right, so we've got that our baseline here. So now we're gonna hex crawl a bit, pretty much. But you're on 2 podcasts now.
Oh, you said something about a bonus question. I want to talk about that
No,
bonus question.
I was gonna say the bonus question for later, but we can do the bonus.
No, that's okay.
No. This question works anywhere, and actually, you know what? It's probably better earlier than late, because God forbid we ran out of time and we forgot to ask it. Since I asked Tom Knaus this question, I've had a lot of feedback that people really like the question, and Hawk the Slayer. It is a movie that until last week I had not watched front to back in my entire life. I just saw bits and pieces, usually late night when I would find it on some random channel, and I would watch it and for a bit and then fall asleep. And I never saw it all. But my friends all loved it. I'm not going to tell you my experience just now, but what is your experience with Hawk the Slayer? Let's hear what you got about it.
So when we were bitten by the fantasy bug, my brother and I, and got really, really deep into playing Dungeons and Dragons, my dad would seek out fantasy films and games and books. And I mean, he was a big science fiction and fantasy reader. And there were movies that we'd always had in our house, like Princess Bride and Willow and those kind of fun family fantasy pictures. But once we were getting older and there were we had this kind of desire to watch fantasy films, he would just bring us whatever he could find. And so like we watched, Conan the Barbarian and all these other kind of sword and sorcery films, The Sword and the Sorcerer and Beastmaster and all those. And one of them was Hawk the Slayer that he found for us. And the only thing that I cognitively remembered forever was the rapid fire arrows.
You too. That was that was like my whole memory of Hawk the Slayer until I fucking saw it on Amazon last week, and I was like, and I'm sorry, my eye opener was, wait, it wasn't just the elf, but it's also the human with the one hand and the crossbow, who apparently has a rapid fire crossbow to go along with a rapid fire bow. Interesting. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And I remember there was a death scene. I remembered. I just viscerally remembered. It was like the kind of like the moving death scene of the movie, if you could call it that. But I rewatched it as an adult, and it dawned on me that it is literally the most D&D fantasy film that has ever been made. It has to be the product of Dungeons and Dragons playing, and then they had enough money to make a movie.
And they wanted to make a
it was a TV special. That's right.
Yeah, over in England, it was a British production. Yeah. I had to look up on Wikipedia after I watched it because I was like, I need to know more.
That's why it's in standard ratio. It's not in widescreen because it was made for TV.
Oh, that makes sense now. Because when I was watching, I was like,
Now,
But
now, think about Hawk the Slayer. It's racist class for sure, right? It's basic
oh, definitely.
D&D.
I mean, the dwarf looks more like a halfling or a hobbit, and acts more like a halfling or a hobbit. But whatever. The elf is mysterious. An excellent bowman. My observation I had this question when I saw this as a teen, and I saw how many fucking arrows do they have for their bow and the crossbow? Because the guy with the crossbow, I only saw him have like two. Yeah, he must have fired at least like a dozen in like the first battle alone.
Sure. Yeah.
But yes, it is a D&D party to the T. Jack Palance chews up every scene he's in, but it is awesome. And
yeah, I think that's just the realization of what kind of movie you're in. I mean, obviously Jack Palance is a good actor. He can act really well, but he just realized, oh, it's this kind of film.
yeah, this is I can do whatever I want. And it's just like, damn. I mean, you have to go into it knowing its limitations. The script is pretty lame. A lot of the acting is over the edge. But and the plot is thin, but it's no thinner than your average D&D plot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if we critiqued our own D&D games as much as we critique movies, we would be in a sore spot.
Oh my god. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. But I know there are people that come back to it and they go, "Oh my god, it's shit." And I was like, it was always shit if you take it on the level of this is a shitty movie. But if you look at it like this is an awesome D&D movie, it's a whole other way you evaluate it. I mean, it's certainly better than the first D&D movie that hit the big screen.
Yeah, it's about on par. I think if Hawk the Slayer had the D&D name in it, we would be a lot more critical of it.
Well, you know what? You're probably right. But then again, Hawk the Slayer has the excuse that it was made in 1981, I think.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty early.
Yeah, so it has the excuse of, yeah, we really had no sets and we had no money, and we probably grabbed most of our actors from the local college. You think about it, it's pretty much on par to some of the YouTube series that you might watch.
Oh yeah, I love those. I love finding little short fantasy flicks or short films, or somebody did it for a 48-hour film festival or whatever and just made something fun. I love those.
So I think you didn't have YouTube back in the 80s, so you didn't have that way of getting your stuff out there. But yeah, it was fun to watch it as an adult. I think I might prefer to watch it a second time, probably highly intox, or make a drinking game out of it.
Every time someone shoots an arrow.
Every time someone shoots an arrow, you take a shot. Well, no. That would be a lethal game to be playing. I'd be like, oh my god, we are 10 seconds into the first. I finished off a bottle of Johnny Walker. I'm dead. Yeah, that'd be a save or die situation. And
hey, there you go.
Or save or gets sick. I don't know, but yeah, that would be. My god, yeah. I might have to do a post on doing a Hawk the Slayer drinking game, but that would mean I'd have to watch it again. I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that. I don't know if I'll enjoy it as much. But for science, maybe. For science!
You map out the drinking game as you're watching it, so you just...
Yeah, you gotta see, like, so what is, every time Hawk says... Well, actually, Hawk doesn't have much in the way of lines. He's mostly there to just like.
He's a strong, silent type.
Yes, it's like, but I'm sure there's going to be something that, like, some of Jack's lines could be used for a drinking game. I'm sure that would be damn cool. So, there's got to be something there. All right. So what I was going to ask you before is, what is it like being the host on two podcasts? It's a lot of work, especially when you're working with others and trying to get all those schedules worked out. I know I've done it. It
Yeah.
ain't easy.
Yeah. It is a lot of time and effort. I actually record and edit both of them as well. So uh it's just something that I enjoy so much, and it's so much fun to kind of share these thoughts and ideas about this game that has meant a lot to me, and then be able to get feedback directly from people, and get some people on there. My wife has joined me for an episode of Save or Die, which was
Nice.
fantastic. um and your wife has been on your podcast a couple times. She's got a lovely podcast voice,
Yeah,
and
that she
you should
does.
get her on more.
I've told her that. I told her I want to get. Actually, what I would love to do is get the three generations. Get my wife, get my son's fiance, because she plays 5e. My son doesn't play at all, but she plays 5e, and they get my niece who just turned 8, and have the three generations of women gamers in. That would be fun.
That'd be cool.
But no,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
it's certainly a lot of work to podcast in general, but it is a lot of fun, and it is a interesting way to share this experience that is gaming with other people.
definitely. I do blogging and I do the podcast, and I enjoy both, but for different reasons. The podcasting, even the solo podcasts, they're more freeform. I tend to be more opinionated, I guess, when I'm talking, as opposed to when I filter myself when I'm writing. But for me, it's a good balance. The two balance out, so I don't get bored doing either one. You can get burned out, I think, if uh, you do anything for too long. I've been blogging for over 9 years, but I'm still
Wow, yeah.
enjoying it. So I'm doing something right.
Yeah, I had always been aware of your blog, but I wasn't an ardent follower of yours until I caught wind of Swords and Wizardry Light, and I loved that little rule set so much. And then I started figuring out who you were, and the first time I went to North Texas RPG Con, I played in your Swords and Wizardry Light game.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, that was
Holy
the
shit.
first. That was the first con game I ever played in. Was your Swords and Wizardry Light game?
Well, that Swords and Wizardry Light game was probably the first. Well, it was definitely the first convention game I ever ran. And I've only probably prior to that only actually run Swords and Wizardry Light a handful of times, because I run Swords and Wizardry, to the point where I could probably run it without looking at the book most times. But
You're right.
Swords and Wizardry
Well,
Light.
you had mentioned after the game that it was the first time you'd ran in front of a live audience.
Yes, as opposed to virtual.
Right.
Yeah, I hadn't run
in a
in
long
front
time.
of a live audience. Oh my god, since '97.
Oh wow.
March of '97. So yeah, and it was good, man. The energy was great, and I have learned since that time that I can't sit while I DM anymore. I especially conventions, I need to stand so I can.
Oh, me too. Yeah, I'm a standy DM for
Yeah,
sure.
I gotta project, and I gotta engage people at the table. It's one thing when you got your steady group, but it's another thing when you're trying to bring in this group of strangers that most of them don't even know each other and engage them right away. And I find it's easier when you're not hiding behind a DM screen, but actually making the eye contact and making the FaceTime. But yeah, I had a blast. I really did. It was a great time.
Yeah, I had fun.
I'm glad you're enjoying the Swords and Wizardry Light rules.
Yeah,
There's a new printing, by the way, which corrected some of our typos and mistakes. So
oh cool.
track down Bad Mike and have him send you some copies.
Yeah, I run lots of games for kids in the area. I actually ran a game for a 5-year-old today
Really?
at our local game store, and my 5-year-old was there playing with us. And we were actually we ran BX because that's what I had with me. yeah, my 8-year-old and 2 5-year-olds all played some 1981 Dungeons and Dragons.
Beautiful. That is awesome, and that's really that's the reason why even Swords and Wizardry Light was. Oh, shut up, dog. She's like, what? But Swords and Wizardry Light was written with the whole idea of making an easy way to kind of replicate how basic was, to something that's not intimidating to bring players old and new into the fold.
Yeah, I think the there's a couple of just great things about it, and so I'm gonna blow smoke at you for a little bit because I'm talking so good about your game here. The things that you did that just I think are great for new gamers is there's no penalty for low stats. You just role play it. I think that's perfect.
Thank you. That was the whole reason for it.
And it only uses a D6 and a D20. I think that's also just absolutely perfect. It's just here's the die you've seen your entire life, and here's the weird one.
Yeah, and that was twofold. It simplified it just as a learning experience, but my wife Rach is legally blind, so like a D20 and a D12 often look similar.
Right.
And a D10 and a D8 often look similar until she picks them up and looks at them. But a D6 and a D20, you're good, man. There's no question.
Yeah, and I mean, and even for people just getting used to dice. I mean, I actually ran a game when I was just getting back into RPGs, and this person, it was actually Castles and Crusades because that's the game I came back to. We were playing Castle Crusades, and this person was just blowing all their rolls, and then I realized they were rolling a D12 the entire time instead of a D20.
Yep.
And I was like, well, sorry.
Going forward, this is the time. I think that, like, my first set of dice, that's going way back, obviously. My first set of dice my mother got me, she actually spent the extra dollars to buy me like a $12 set of dice back in, the early 80s. But each die was a different color. So once you knew that your D12 was blue and your D20 was brown, you couldn't mix it up. The idea of having dice of one color because they look really cool is cool, and it's great for those of us who know what we're looking at. But for a new player, color-coded dice, I think that works best.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot easier to say roll the red one
Yeah.
than it is to say roll the one with the triangle faces and 20 sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I run Swords and Wizardry Light, I throw 3d6 and a d20 in a dice bag, and I hand out the rule set and the dice, and just try to get kids playing RPGs.
Dude, that is so awesome. Like I said, reach out to Bad Mike. There's another, I think, 10,000 copies of Swords and Wizardry Light. The first 10,000 copies are in the wind. So they made a few corrections. They took my giant rat out of the artwork on it. I'm very upset by that. I have an affinity for rats, but in any case. So, crap, Carl. Believe it or not, we've been yapping for half an hour.
Oh wow!
This is. I'm going to be telling you. I seem to be telling almost everybody. I got to have you back because this was really good.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Well, I think on that note, we are going to sign off from the rest of you and give you back your time. As usual, stay safe, be well, God bless. Roll your dice. Roll the appropriate die. I think that's going to have to be the new line. Like, make sure you're rolling the D20, not the D12 when it calls for it. And I will talk with you all tomorrow. Later, folks.